Welcome back to the Week 11 college football betting locks and predictions, and let's get right into it with a recap of last week. We started out with the big one, number 3, Penn State hosting number 4, Ohio State, and this one followed the same script as many of these James Franklin-led Penn State games have against top 10 teams. Penn State came into the game thinking this was the one, and they end up disappointing down the stretch. A critical 4th and goal plays from within the 3-yard line go awry for them. Heinous coaching. We actually had +4 on this, so if they took the field goal, we would have made out fine in that one. But instead, they just missed the touchdown, lose again to Ohio State. Both teams are looking good, but with the tiebreaker now, it's going to be tough for Penn State without a ton of help to make it to the Big Ten championship game. So they fall in that one. Duke at Miami, and Duke is up a lot in the third quarter, but then Miami goes on an insane 30-0 run around and ends up covering the number in this game. So a little bit of luck for us. We actually did have a betting lock on this one that we added later in the week, so be sure to check out the Discord in the top right. Ole Miss at Arkansas, bad luck here. Ole Miss, just a stellar offensive performance based on what they've been putting up the rest of the year. And Arkansas, just a disgusting defensive performance there out of them. They're all but out of it now, and that was just a brutal loss in front of the home fans after beating Tennessee at home. Makes it even more shocking how they did that because, man, this was just a brutal game. Oregon goes to Michigan and beats them up. A few controversial calls in this game, but Oregon lays it on, including a touchdown late that was significant to some. Florida at Georgia, and this is a game Florida could have won if they could have stayed healthy. Lagway gets carted off with what looked like a hamstring injury. Carson Beck, a horrible game, but Georgia gets it done and even gets up to the 2-possession number at 14 there. So a good game for them, but man, it was very concerning when Florida was up 10-3, end up losing their second-string quarterback, go down to the third string. So not great for Napier there, and I think the book might be written for him. Personally, I think he should be spared for now because this is just brutal with the injuries. And if you look at their losses, it's Miami, Texas A&M, Georgia, and then a brutal one at Tennessee. Those are very respectable losses, as we were saying in the preseason, how it would happen. But they did kind of get curb stomped by Miami and Texas A&M. So wouldn't be surprised if Napier gets cold in the next few weeks here. Then Iowa State cannot beat Texas Tech in a brutal one there. Texas Tech ends up scoring the late touchdown, and Iowa State's trick play goes awry, and they lose their first game of the season. We'll see what happens down the stretch. But without that undefeated record, and Texas Tech would have actually been one of their better wins, this Iowa State resume starts to fall apart quickly. Then we had Indiana beating Michigan State, but we did put a late betting lock on this, but Indiana just rolls, so that betting lock fails there. Michigan State was not fully ready to play in this football game. Moving on to the second page, we had Vautech at Syracuse. They come up just short in that one. Texas A&M at South Carolina, and a drubbing this one turned out to be. South Carolina and Shane Beamer and co. get it done, move to 5-3 with, you could argue they should have won that LSU game if the refereeing wasn't so heinous in that game. Now they go on to Vandy. We'll talk about this game this week. Tough spot for Texas A&M. They didn't really have to get beat up as bad as they did. They kind of just collapsed there, but brutal one, and I think they will bounce back and have a good end of the season. They do host Texas in that marquee last week of the season game there. And then Louisville at Clemson, shocker of the week. We actually ended up laying the points late in the week on the Discord, adding a betting lock there, getting Clemson -10, and Louisville just runs them out of the gym. Death Valley was clearing in the fourth quarter, and we haven't seen that in quite some time from Clemson. I knew Louisville was a bit of a sleeper team, but wasn't sure if they would have given up in this spot. Their second consecutive road game, and they've played quite a few games in a row now, have kind of gotten beaten up, thought they'd be out of it, whereas Clemson was off the bye, and they just weren't ready to play. Horrible coaching here for Dabo, and he's really got to rethink his approach to the portal, I think, in this offseason, because their resume is really paper thin right now. Big loss to Georgia, big loss to Louisville. See what they can do against Virginia Tech. I will preview that game this week here. And then Kentucky at Tennessee. Tennessee does end up winning the game, but they do not cover. And it would have been kind of scummy if they did. They had the ball late deep into Kentucky territory, chose not to go with the touchdown, as you do. So Tennessee comes up just short there in terms of the cover. Pitt at SMU, and very impressive by SMU. I've been fading Pitt all year. Finally, we got one to go our way. SMU, very impressive win here. Just kind of a curb stomping of Pitt, and it seemed like a party at Gerald Ford Stadium that night. SMU has a good chance to make the ACC championship now with Clemson out of the way and play Miami. So we'll see what happens down the stretch. Remember, my preseason prediction was Vautech against SMU in the ACC championship. Could still happen, but it would have to take a Vautech winning out and Miami dropping a couple games as well. So probably not going to happen, but we'll see what happens down the stretch there. And then final game, TCU at Baylor, a little rivalry game here. We got TCU to cover the 3.5 there. Baylor ends up winning on a late field goal. So great game, back and forth game there, and a lock hits for us in that one to make it even more enjoyable. So moving on to week 11, we've got some Wednesday night action. Northern Illinois at Western Michigan. Northern Illinois, the marquee performance of the year, beating Notre Dame. They've fallen off significantly since then, but I think they've got enough to bounce back from their 1-3 start in MAC play and beat this Western Michigan team. We'll lay the one in the hook in a kind of tough road game. None of these road environments on these weekday games are really tough. So I like to back the Huskies there. Pure number play, but we think NIU is the better team. Miami at Georgia Tech. I went back and forth on this one, but they moved this game to a day game, so I'll stick with my guns and pick Miami. Preseason, I was picking Georgia Tech to win this one, but they've just been, worse since their perception has significantly changed. When we thought they got a top 10 ranked win against Florida State, turns out just Florida State stunk, and Georgia Tech is just kind of a middle-of-the-road team. Miami is a team that likes to make it interesting with these middle-of-the-road teams, but I think that they will be able to clean that one up. Keep in mind, later in the week, we could add a spread play. Georgia Tech's getting 10 or 11 right now. We'll see where that number goes. If the number is enticing later in the week, we might back them there. Florida at Texas. I mean, this should be a good game, but it certainly won't be now that Florida is so injured. I mean, it's brutal. Napier has them ready to play these big matchups, but Texas really needs to come back after that Georgia loss and, prove something. We'll see where they're ranked. And for a number of these teams, it will be interesting to see where they're ranked by the actual playoff committee this week. Remember that those first rankings come out on Tuesday. Georgia at Ole Miss, and we're going to take the points with Ole Miss +3, just under a field goal. I think Ole Miss wins this outright, but if Georgia does end up hitting the field goal to win the football game, we are still fine there. So I really like this spot. Ole Miss has really started to round into form. Georgia is overall a good team, but Carson Beck just has a problem with the turnovers that he hasn't really been able to solve, and I don't know how much coaching that Kirby Smart can do can kind of keep those turnovers at bay. So I like Ole Miss to win this one in what should be one of the more electric environments of the year in Oxford there. Michigan at Indiana. Insane stat lines all around with this 9-0 start for Coach Sig and the boys. Michigan has become a tire fire. I'm going to pick Indiana to win this game by quite a few points there. Iowa State at Kansas. Coming off the bounce back here, I'm going to take Iowa State to win. Kansas a little underrated with that 2-6 record. Again, not playing at their home stadium in their home campus, so just a forgettable season for them. Remember that Kansas is only 3-point underdogs in this game, which implies around 6 points of neutral field favorability for Iowa State. Maybe a little less if we're only going to give Kansas, 2 points for their home field because they are at the temporary site. Either way, it's a spooky spot here. I'm going to pick Iowa State, but I'm not going to like it here. And let's move to the second page where we got Clemson at Vautech. Again, one of the games of the year in the ACC, definitely brought down by last week's performances by both of these teams. Vautech down to the 2 losses, Clemson down to the 1, no longer unscathed. I said preseason that Vautech would win this game, and I'm not really sold on Clemson even being a top 25 team. So why not? Let's go with Vautech to win in McLean Stadium there. Vautech to win at home in Blacksburg there. Then Colorado at Texas Tech, big noon Saturday here, and I like Texas Tech to win this one outright. Colorado is kind of being slept on compared to the absolute hype train that was last year until that Oregon game that chopped them down. A lot of naysayers about this Colorado team. I think this is a tough spot, though. Texas Tech is coming off that big win against Iowa State, so we'll see if they can do it twice. I think they can to knock out the Buffaloes there. And then Mississippi State at Tennessee. I think Tennessee wins this one easily, but not by more than these 3 possessions here. We'll take the +23 in the hook there. Solid numbers play. Mississippi State just rounding in the form. It's the early days for the coaching staff there. I like them to cover the number in a tough road game there. Then South Carolina, Vandy. I think both of these teams should be ranked. Again, hopefully the playoff committee is able to get that one right and rectify the wrongs of the AP poll. Either way, it's just a massive letdown spot for South Carolina right here, Lenore, Sellers, and the boys. I like Diego Pavia, this Vanderbilt team, to take care of them at home and improve upon their 6-3 record after a nice little win, a true road game at Auburn last week. And then Alabama at LSU. I think this should be the number 1 environment of the week, and for that reason, I'm going to take LSU +3. They have room to work. Both of these teams coming off the bye after their last games. LSU just lost to Texas A&M in a game that, if they just tamp down the turnovers, they would have easily won against Texas A&M, but they also couldn't stop Marcel Reed. They'll have to watch for the dual threat with Milroe here, but I like LSU to win this game outright, and we will take the 3 points just in case the little candy will help us in that one, but should be an excellent game there. Let me know what you guys think about that game. I know everyone has an opinion on it. Let me know in the comment section below. Last two games, Washington at Penn State, and this spread is just under 2 possessions in favor of Penn State. I like Penn State to win this game and bounce back off that Ohio State loss. Washington hasn't been traveling to the East Coast very well. Add to that the fact that they just got a fraudulent, a little bit win over USC, and I think it's a big letdown spot plus step up spot for Penn State. We could be laying the number here later in the week if it comes down a little bit. Final game, nightcap, BYU at Utah. Holy war here, and I like Utah to win outright. Don't ask me how they're going to do it because this has been an ugly Utah team so far. But BYU, remember that they almost lost to Oklahoma State at home. Utah has to get some of that aura back with these night games. I think this is the area where they do it. Regardless of how bad the team is, I like Utah to win this football game. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe and comment your predictions below.